Hello, my name is Colin Walker. I'm an attorney at Fairfield and Woods in Denver. I'm also the author of the C-Level Law blog, where we talk about many employment law issues, especially as related to C-level executives and companies they work for. I'm here today with my friend and colleague, Trent Walden of Forensic Discovery, and we're going to talk today about some computer issues that you may encounter with employees or former employees or otherwise in your business. So before we get to that subject, let me ask Trent to go ahead and introduce himself to you.
So as Colin mentioned, my name's Trent. I do digital forensics investigations for companies and employees on both sides. And when doing the testifying work and getting involved in these engagements, we've seen a little bit of everything.
Yeah. So one of the things that Trent and I have seen and have worked together a lot on is when you have an employee or a former employee that you suspect is doing something inappropriate with your computer systems, such as perhaps stealing confidential information. And when that happens, it's usually one of you, a coworker, a manager, or someone in that position that gets the first inkling that this may be happening. And so it's really, it's not something that Trent or I can help you with immediately, because you're the one that's noticing this. So the question is, what do you do when you have that suspicion? And one issue that we encounter very often is that you may have an in-house IT professional, or you may have an IT consultant that comes in periodically and helps you with your IT systems. So I wanted to ask Trent, tell us about that. Tell us, what's the difference between that kind of person and what you do?
So there's going to be certain things that an IT individual can and can't see on a live computer. So typically, what we encounter is a IT individual that works at the company or consults at the company will be the first to, on site to take a look. And when they do that, their activity on the computer can possibly modify or alter what an expert eventually does see. I'd recommend that they wouldn't not install any software on the computer, and then also don't plug any drives into the computer as well.
Okay, and so the reason for this, and Trent will back me up, I'm sure, is that your normal IT person may not have the expertise that a forensic IT consultant would have. They might, but in most cases they will not, and they're just not equipped to deal with what eventually may very well become litigation. Is that fair to say?
That is, and then other considerations are, as far as digital forensics expert working instead of an in-house IT will end up looking at a live machine, and digital forensics expert will take a forensic copy of the drive, so what we call is read-only format, and then perform an investigation on the computer using forensic software on that read-only media.
Okay, and so what you've done basically there is you've taken a control copy of whatever kind of device or media you're using. So you have that, you know it's unaltered and it's pure, if you will, and then you can go do your investigation. Really, Trent can go do the investigation. That's very important, because when we get into a litigation posture, and when you've got someone you suspect is stealing trade secrets or something like that, you're probably headed towards litigation. When we're doing that, we have to make sure we don't destroy or alter evidence, because if we do, we can get sanctioned by the judge, and that can include a lot of things, but it can be anything from paying the other side's attorney's fees, which is bad enough, up to a default judgment against you, which is a really, really bad thing to happen. So that's why we're so careful about this. And I would say the first step is to make sure whoever is doing the investigation is someone like Trent, who's got a lot of experience and knows what to do to get this into a litigation posture. Is that fair to say?
It is. And I'd also say immediately what can be done to preserve evidence would be just to unplug, as soon as the employee leaves, unplug the computer. Don't let anybody access it till you've been able to make a determination on whether or not you feel that this could fall in litigation, or whether or not you think that essentially this can be nothing to worry about and another employee can use the computer.
Yeah.
But we just kind of want to keep that system offline and away from anybody's hands until someone's able to determine what to do with it.
Okay, well, that's great advice. Let me ask you next, can you give us a couple of examples of what an employee or former employee might do to misappropriate information from the employer?
Typically, when an employee leaves the company, they may copy information off the computer. This can be done by plugging in a USB thumb drive, which we'll see in an investigation, see in the registry, what drives are plugged in. They may access files from, like, let's say, old prior work product, prior jobs, copy it over. We also see employees email themselves files. So we look for like web activity. They may log into their personal Gmail account, send themselves an email as an email attachment. They may have Dropbox synced on the computer. Okay. So there's a data exfiltration aspect that, we're always concerned with. Also, there's data destruction. So if it's a sales individual, they may be working on a big job that they're trying to close, and they want to take it to their new employer. So they actually may delete any documents related to that potential job or that deal. Okay. And then they'll start working on the with other employer.
Okay. And if, as we're recommending, the employer takes the proper steps to preserve the evidence, is that something that you can then drill into and try and figure out exactly what happened?
Right. Yeah. We call that first step like a triage investigation. So essentially it's a flat rate investigation, and the client will give us a list of, these are all the things that we're concerned about. This is a little background about this individual, when they came to work, when they left, when things became suspicious. And then we do a forensic image of the computer. And at that point, we try to fill in all the gaps and answer all the questions. And, that will provide the attorney and the client enough information on whether or not it's something that they need to pursue.
Yeah. And I can say from experience working with Trent that if things go well, and you never know how things are going to go, each case is a little different. Very often we can put together exactly or approximately what happened, and we can call Trent into court and he can testify in front of the judge or jury and tell us, here's what happened. And that can very often allow us to bring claims and prevail on claims against the employee, and sometimes get your information back, or if not, to get an award of damages against the employee. So a lot to be talked about there. But this raises another issue that's permeating many workplaces these days. What about employees that want to use their own devices at work, or employers that maybe even ask their employees to use their own devices? What are your feelings about that?
There's some goods and bads. The goods is it can save money, save cost. It's definitely convenient for the employees to be able to use their personal devices. Things that the employer would need to consider would be, does it cause a potential liability? Could this, if they're using their personal PC, could they have work resources on them? They leave the company and those work resources are still on the device. My personal feeling or suggestions would be to not allow employees to use their personal PCs. Phones are okay. Granted that there are guidelines or expectations as far as how an employee is going to access company resources on the phone. Okay. Typically, we just see text messaging with other employees.
Okay. What about a remote system that's used with a personal computer?
So that's the exception. So if the employer set up a system for remote desktop access, let's say like a Citrix, Splashtop, something like that, that essentially locks down the employee's personal computer to where the only thing that's accessing computer resources is through a graphical user interface, a screen where you're moving the mouse and keyboard, then at that point, that tends to be fine. Because then all the loggings on that side, things are fairly locked down.
Right. Okay. Well, I agree with Trent. I really don't recommend that you allow employees to use their own personal devices. I know, startup businesses and small businesses, it's awful tempting to do that. But I can tell you, if you have one problem along these lines, you're going to wish you had all your employees using either your equipment or a remote device like Trent is talking about, and they'll pay for themselves. But a lot more that could be said, but I think that's enough for now. Trent, thanks so much for being with us here today. We hope you found this useful, and hope to see you on down the line at C-Level Law. Thank you.